Alrighty. So we're going to jump right into it talking about Japan. So for the uninitiated, Japan has a birth rate problem right now. Japan birth rates. So to maintain a population, obviously you need a birth rate of about two. Because for every woman that gives birth, obviously there's a man that can't give birth. So to reach a stable, like consistent birth rate that will sustain the population without any migration would be exactly a two birth rate. But obviously, some percentage of those births, people die in child labor, people die when they're kids or whatever, and they don't make it to adulthood. And so if you had zero immigration, you would want a birth rate over two. But almost every country in the world has some level of immigration, and that helps make up for that gap. So you could have a birth rate of 1.8 internally, but if you have enough immigration to make up for that gap, then it really isn't too big of a problem. But Japan is in a really serious position right now because their birth rate is as low as 1.2, um, reaching a record low of 1.2 in 2023 and a further decline to 1.37 in 2024. Isn't 1.2 lower than I think the AI is messing up here? But the birth rate is very very low in Japan. Like it's like 1.2 or something like that, which is so low that it would need a lot. You'd need a lot of immigration to make up that gap. And furthermore, Japan's culture isn't really set up for a large amount of immigration. Put aside the fact that they're an island, and so immigration to there isn't exactly the easiest, but they also have a very homogenous, very like insular, arguably xenophobic culture. And my understanding is that the xenophobia thing has been getting better over the years, but it is still my understanding is sort of a core part of that culture there. And so I don't know, they wouldn't be open to um, any large scale immigration to fix this problem. So they're kind of in a really weird spot. How do they fix this problem? Well, they need to up the birth rates internally. And you may think, oh, that sounds easy. Just get people to fuck more. But I it's apparently not that easy in the year 2025 when the dating scene is really terrible, when all common spaces that people would typically meet a lot of the time have either been degraded, the popularity of them has gone down, or they've been removed completely. Um, there are so many different factors that play into why it is difficult to get the birth rate up. And that means that there's a million different ways that you could go about trying to skin this cat, right? I could conceive of numerous different ways that you can go about trying to incentivize or punish people, incentivize people to have kids or punish people for not having kids. It seems like uh, my understanding is the way this was presented to me was that it was a tax on single people, was that if you are not in a relationship of some kind, that you are subject to a higher tax rate than those that are in a relationship of some kind. I'm hoping this article will give me a bit more information because I have a feeling there's some details that are being left out there, and I'm interested to see how this is. Single tax to start in 2026. Is there a possibility that single people will be taxed? Financial fields slash other taxes. There seems to be a lot of buzz on social media about the introduction of a singles tax in April 2026. Some people may wonder if there really is a tax increase only for singles. In this article, we will explain the rumor about the single tax and focus on whether it is true or not. The term single tax is said to be a hot topic on social media. This is the name some people are using for a system aimed at supporting child rearing. Japan is facing a declining birth rate, and the government is looking to introduce a support measure using insurance premiums. Let's take a closer look at how this system works and what its impact is. What is child what is the Child Care Support Grant System? The Child and Child Care Support Grant System, which will be gradually introduced from fiscal year 2026, is part of Japan's efforts to combat the declining birth rate. Under this system, funds will be added to the insurance premiums paid by all citizens and used to support childcare. The system funds will be added to the insurance premiums. Does that mean that they're going to have a mandatory increase to the insurance premiums to pay for this childcare stuff? That seems like that's what it's saying. How will you pay for it? Everyone is responsible, collected as an additional charge to insurance premiums. So I was right. Yes, they're going to add on additional charge. Those who won't benefit also bear the burden. Also applicable to single people and households that have finished raising children. Amount collected in the fiscal year approximately 1 to 250 yen per person per month planned. What is it used for? Expanding child allowances. Payments extended until high school age, 3 yen per month, the third child and onwards. Pregnancy and childbirth support, 5 yen paid, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so you just get paid for having kids. So they just pay you for having a below high school age kid. You get paid 5 yen per paid each when pregnancy and birth are notified. Okay, so you just get 5 yen for having birth, which is nothing. Okay, we're gonna give you like how much is a yen? Wait, even if it was a dollar, even if 1 yen was $1, this would be kind of stupid. What do you want? $5 for having a kid? But hold on, Japanese yen to USD. Isn't it like a dollar or 10 cents? Yeah, so 5 Japanese yen is 35 cents. Why are they even? I feel like I have to be misreading this. There's no way they're pregnancy and childbirth support, 5 yen paid each when pregnancy and birth are notified. We who cares about 35 cents? I feel like I have to. There's something wrong. There's something wrong. There's no way they would just. Who would care? What would be even the purpose of implementing that? Are you gonna entice people with 35 cents? That's weird. Establishment of any child can attend kindergarten system. Okay, so free kindergarten for everybody. I guess they didn't already have that there. Maybe their school system is first grade through 12. When parents take parental leave, they receive a benefit equivalent to 10% of their take-home pay. I don't know what that means. Parental leave. Oh, parental leave. So like when your wife is, so if you're the wife and you're pregnant, or if your wife is pregnant and you're going to take time off to support them, or to start raising the kid. Uh, okay, so if you make 100 grand a year and you say, all right, I'm going to take a month off because my wife is going to have a kid in the next week or two, and we want to have a couple weeks to kind of settle in with it, they'll say, all right, we're going to give you just 10 grand up front, just because. The purpose of this system is to create an environment that makes it easier to have and raise children, but there is an ongoing debate about the fairness of the burden. The system is called the singles tax because there are people who bear the burden but do not receive any direct benefits. But isn't that just taxation in general, right? I mean, that is the social contract inherently. You're not going to have access to every single thing your tax dollars pay for. That's part of having a functioning society. We live in a very complex, interconnected world in the year 2025, right? I mean, every single thing you have access to, your cell phone, your this bottle of bug spray, your bike helmet, everything that you could possibly have access to has gone through thousands and thousands of people's hands. The people that designed it, the people that manufactured it, the people that delivered it, the people that sold it to you. All of these, none of these things would be possible individually. And so the idea that like it takes a, what's the saying? It takes a village. Usually that's referred to raising a child, but that's referred to running a society too. It takes a village. And in that sense, anybody who's complaining about not getting the benefits from this tax program is completely missing the point of taxation, of a functioning society, of governance, of the year 20 of modern economics. They don't understand any of that. I The way that that could make sense is if it was overbearing. Of course, if the tax was way too much for the single people, then it would be unreasonable, and then you would have a legitimate argument because they really are bearing the burden. But even the people who have kids and are going to materially benefit from this program, they're paying taxes for things that they aren't having a direct access to, right? They're paying taxes for prisons. They're paying taxes for, I'm assuming Japan has some sort of pseudo food stamp system or universal healthcare. You're not always going to be accessing every bit of healthcare. There's certainly going to be somebody out there that's going to be more expensive healthcare wise than you, and they're going to eat up more of the tax dollars than you. And so therefore more of your tax dollars are going to pay for their healthcare than yours. It's just, I don't like this, like it's devoid of logic. Singles and households who have finished raising children also bear the burden. Generous support for families with children, but not for single people. Opposition to the idea of raising children as a society. Okay, wait. Why do some people feel this is unfair? Singles and households who have finished raising children also bear the burden. Yeah, but that's taxation. We just went over that. Complaining that you aren't going to directly benefit from this taxation program is stupid and completely missing the point of how a government and a society should function within the, in the context of the year 2025 and modern economics and yada, yada, yada. Generous support for families with children, but not for single people. I don't see necessarily any problem with providing some level of financial support to people who have children as a small enticement. It doesn't seem like a terrible idea. Children are really expensive, and we want to give them the best lives possible. And so, assuming that these parents, most of these parents, would use the money to make their children's lives better, at least to some extent, um, it's a good thing, and I'd be in favor of it. And the opposition to the idea of raising children as a society. What does that mean? Raising children as a society? It's not like we're creating like these like children's wards or something, and kids are forced to go be raised by the state or something ridiculous like that. This is just a tax. This is a very benign taxation program where we tax everybody and then use some of that money to help specifically increase the birth rates, facilitate better child care or child raising and whatnot. However, this system is not a formal tax, but functions as part of the social insurance system. Some countries have introduced a single tax in the past. The case of Bulgaria, 1968 to 1989, single people will be taxed at 5 to 10% of their income. As a result, the birth rate fell from 2.18 to 1.86. The economic burden has increased and more people are refraining from marriage and child rearing. Wait, this is strange. This doesn't make any sense. Single people will be taxed 5 to 10% of their income. Okay, so that's what they used to do in Bulgaria. As a result, the birth rate fell from 2.18 to 1.86. How could you possibly claim that the birth rate fell as a result of this single tax? My intuition would tell me that the single tax would be fighting against that, and that without it, that the decrease would be even greater, that it would be 2.18 all the way down to maybe 1.8 or lower, 1.75 or 1.5 even, or something like that. My gut would, every bit of intuition tells me that the single tax incentivizes people to be together and to have more children. And so, without any further explanation, to claim that this is the reason why the birth rate fell is because directly due to this program is so facetious and wrong. The economic burden has increased and more people are refraining from marriage and child rearing. Yeah, see, that would be more, that to me that seems more like what would be the reason for the decrease in the birth rate, and that to the extent that the single tax existed, it probably pushed back against that. It's impossible to know because we don't have a counterfactual, hypothetical, alternate universe where we could see what would have happened if we had not implemented that program in Bulgaria between the years of 1968 and 1989. But I speculate that it's not doing what this article says it did. Thus, although the single tax was expected to be effective as a measure to combat the declining birth rate, there have been cases in which it actually had the opposite effect. America, child tax credit reduces tax burden for families with children. And France has a program where the family allowances provide financial support to families raising children. Okay. Cases like these show that Japan's system also requires careful design. Will the financial support system increase the burden? Some people feel that the increase in insurance premiums is essentially a tax increase. Yeah, that's fair. That's completely fair. Yeah, absolutely. Especially in Japan, where I think you're required to have some sort of insurance. Without support, the birth rate could decline more rapidly and the labor shortage could worsen. Yeah, that's just okay. They're just laying out the downside of not doing a program like this. The specific amount of tax to be collected and the mechanism for it will depend on future discussions. Okay, so they don't have any of this set in stone yet. It will be necessary to keep a close eye on what impacts this will have on Japanese society and the economy in the future. Summary: the child care support grant system will be introduced from fiscal year 2026. The name single tax is a colloquial term and is not an official tax. Since insurance premiums are added to child care support, single people also bear the burden. In the case of Bulgaria, the singles tax contributed to a decline in the birth rate. I don't know how you could possibly claim that without any substantiation whatsoever. I hate it when people do this, when they make very specific claim using very specific evidence like this, and then they provide zero substantiation. And now to prove them wrong or to fact check them, I have to go spend 20 minutes doing a bunch of research and reading a bunch of articles. Whoever wrote this article spent over an hour, I can guarantee you, typing up all this and spell checking it and making sure that it was all correct. So like, why would you not go that extra little bit and just put one line in there that substantiates your claim a bit more? Frustrating. So yeah, this seems to me like a sort of backwards way of going about doing this. I think it's fairly benign. You know, if you keep the tax rate low enough, I think it's somewhat benign and ultimately not that impactful even for single people. Like, yeah, they lose a little bit of their income to taxes or whatever, but it's, they're still going to function for the most part. But I don't know if this is, I would think that tax incentives are a much better way to go about enticing, are a much better way to go about facilitating a higher birth rate using the economic system than would be punishing people for being single. I mean, obviously, there's so many layers to this. You know, you could be in a relationship and plan to not have kids, which I would imagine is a higher percentage of people than there's ever been. Um, you could be single totally by choice, which is fine as well. I don't think necessarily you should have to be taxed more as a result of that. It seems to me like the most effective way. It's sort of like when you're training a dog. The dog is gonna react much better to positive, like rewarding good behavior, rewarding what you're wanting them to do, instead of punishing them when they don't want you, when they're doing what you don't want them to do. Usually, positive reinforcement is much more effective than negative reinforcement, and I would think the same similar principle applies to this whole tax, trying to incentivize birth rates to increase situation, where it's like I think it makes more sense to try and have positive reinforcement and facilitate, tax breaks and maybe, increase that 10% take home pay or the parental leave bonus to 20% or something. I mean, I think those sort of incentives would go a lot further in actually incentivizing people. It's like, what do nobody who, a huge portion of kids are accidents, and a huge portion of kids are very purposeful decisions that would have happened regardless of whether the taxation system supports it or not. So you're targeting that weird group of people in the middle that are sort of unsure about having a kid, but that maybe a tax benefit or something would push them over the edge. It's not like somebody who's single is like, oh man, to avoid this 10% tax, I'm just going to go have a baby with this. Like, no, that's not. I think there would be far less of that than people saying, I don't know, I know we've been talking about having a kid and they just made this rule that says we get 2 grand a month just for having a kid. Like, now it seems pretty enticing there, Barbara. Maybe we should do it. So I don't know. Seems like the wrong way to go about doing it. I'm fascinated to see if this actually plays out because I mean the fact that they're referencing Bulgaria in the 1968 to 1989 as their example of this being done in the past probably means this hasn't been done for quite a while, and I would be interested to see how effective it would be in the year 2025 in our current climate.